Sure, I think there may be a couple people still trying to jump on, but we can start when you're ready.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. And we are, Debbie, if you want to hit the record button if you haven't already. So we want to welcome everybody. This is our first training webinar for the Innovative Service Development Grant. We are beginning our application season for preparing for the new fiscal year beginning July 1. My name is David Darm. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission, and I'm very pleased to be sharing. This is sort of the beginning of introductions to the ISD grant application process. And we will have a series of other opportunities for folks to get some technical assistance and training around this. So this is really just an introduction today. So the purpose of the webinar is to promote awareness about this grant program. I know many of you have been through this training many times, so this might just be a refresh course, but some of you might be new. So this is a chance for you to learn about what the grant entails. We're going to walk through guidance on the application process. There are some changes, some adjustments that we've made for this year. So even for those of you who've been through this webinar, you'll still be getting some new information than maybe what you did get in the last time we did this. And then, of course, it is also to encourage innovative ideas, help stir some ideas for projects for this upcoming year or into the future that you might be interested in pursuing in your community. The outline of today's presentation, we will provide an overview of the grant. We'll throw some questions for you to consider as you're developing proposals within your community. We'll go through the application process and the review that we go through as our subcommittee goes through the proposals, and then we will at the end of this have an opportunity for questions for participants. So as far as the rules today, this is intended for the audience, particularly our community transportation coordinators, CTCs, or any other interested parties that want to partner with the CTC or work with the CTC in developing a proposal for an innovative service development grant. This is the first of 2 webinars. We will have a second one in April. I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. We are recording this webinar. So for those of you who cannot attend, or you knew somebody who could not attend, we will have this recording available shortly, as well as the copy of the presentation so you can be able to access it at your own time. As always, please keep your microphones muted. If you do not, there will be an opportunity at the end for questions, but we do encourage those who if you have a question that comes to mind as I'm going through the material, please use the chat box. I'm going to ask that Sherry or anybody on our team to be monitoring that, because I cannot see that on my screen here. So if you have a question, we will get to that at the end of the presentation. And I think that is all for the rules. Sherry, was there anything else to add as far as kind of the introductions before we dive into the grant itself?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you, though.
All right. So to kind of give some background on this program, this grant has been quite evolving over the years for us. When we started this back in 2016, it was originally called the Mobility Enhancement Grant. And that was a very nominally funded, about $2 million, give or take, or a little bit less than that some years. And that was really to test kind of the beginnings of this testing new ideas. And then in 2019, it got expanded to significantly more funding through the Multi-Use Corridors of Regional Economics Program, or MCORS. And that was funded at $10 million in recurring for 2 years. That set up a lot of what we have today as far as the goals of the grant. But then as we got into, sorry, are y'all hearing beeping? Or is that just on my end?
Oh, I hear it.
I'll give it a second if we can mute that line. Okay, so once COVID-19 pandemic hit, the legislature did away with the MCORS program, which also did away with the funding. And it was as a result, the ISD grant was not funded for 1 year. And then in 2022, the legislature appropriated $4 million to basically, in essence, reinstate the program or put funding back into the grant itself. And then the following year it was 6 million. So this is kind of a theme. One of the things to keep in mind with this grant is that it is very challenging for us to predict from 1 year to the next how much funding we're going to have. And we're trying to reach this point of Goldilocks where if we get a certain level of funding ensures that it is competitive, which is a theme of this grant, is to ensure that we get the best ideas and award the funding based on the best ideas presented to us. And so this year, the current legislative session, we asked for it to be at 4 million because we wanted to ensure that it was competitive. But as turning out right now, we are in the middle of legislative session. We are expected to have the budget finalized by next week. It is looking so far like it is going to be funded at 3 million. So much less than what we asked for. Now that is not final yet, but it is looking very likely that is going to be the case. So this is going to have a major impact on our decision going into the next year about which projects to award and how much to award for those projects. As far as the goals of the grant, pretty much ever since MCORS, it has been consistent in this regard with 3 primary goals that a project can support. One, increase access for an individual with transportation disadvantage to get to work, healthcare, school, or whatever other activities are in the community. And I would say that also you can consider that as maybe somebody who is considered TD eligible, but maybe not necessarily has been served by the program, such as an individual with a developmental disability. If that is a need, I would say that would kind of fall into your first goal here. Second goal is to increase cross-county regional mobility. That has been a theme the legislature has been interested in for many years now and trying to increase regional cross-county types of mobility options. And then third is to reduce barriers to access a fixed route system, such as the first or last mile, if that is available in the community. Now, the projects can support a combination of these goals. It doesn't have to be just one goal, but it has to, at minimum, has to address one of these 3 in order to qualify for funding. When we talk about innovation, often on the surface, people might think that might have to do with technology. Now, granted, technology can be incorporated into the project, but that's not necessarily what this is about. This is really designed to try to test something new. And that being new has to have some kind of an added value to the customer perspective. Now, the customer could be the rider. That is, for example, let's say you want to test using a on-demand type of a service that is not currently available. The added value in that case would be for the customer, they have a faster, rapid response to getting a trip versus scheduling maybe 24 to 48 hours beforehand. But also the added value could be from the commission standpoint. As we are representing the taxpayers in this regard, what might be an added value could be a reduced cost of delivering services in which the state is investing in these type of a project. So when we talk about innovation, again, thinking about it in terms of testing something for the purpose of trying to add value to a customer's perspective, whether that be the rider or the state. And I'm kind of elaborating here in this slide. Some examples of that could be thinking about extending services that are not currently available, whether it's by a time of the day, such as the weekend, or areas of your county or a multi-county area that you might be struggling to serve or underserved. It could be, again, utilizing a on-demand or transportation network company like model that may not be currently something that you test with your existing trip and equipment grant program. Serving a segment of the population that is currently underserved or not served. So that could be, again, individuals with developmental disabilities. Maybe you see individuals who are veterans that are considered transportation disadvantaged, but have not necessarily been able to meet their needs under your existing grant. This would be an example where you may be wanting to pursue a project that serves that specific group within the transportation disadvantaged population. Again, looking at the cost, you could be looking at trying to test a lower rate. That would be, again, from the value perspective of the state's investment. And then also exploring access to a fixed route system, which we know also has a value from cost savings. So those are some examples that you could consider as you're thinking about designing a project. As far as who is eligible to participate, as far as a direct recipient of the grant, that is limited to community transportation coordinators, CTCs, that are defined in Chapter 427. Now, just because they are the only recipients of the grant does not mean other organizations can't participate in the project. So we do encourage CTCs, if it is appropriate and available, to also consider non-traditional providers as part of their project, such as a TNC, that could be as a subcontracted basis. We also encourage that if you are looking at doing a regional project and you're expanding, say you're a CTC, and say, I'll use an example of Duval County, and you wanted to be able to partner with Nassau and St. John's and Putnam County to do a 4-county regional project, then only one CTC could be eligible as a direct recipient, meaning there has to be an identified lead CTC to propose something like that. But in the proposal, it would identify how the other partnering CTCs would be a part of it. And again, partners can include beyond just transportation side of things. They could also include colleges, businesses, human service agencies, etc. Providers must be determined TD eligible. So you would have to go through your TD eligibility process like you normally do with your trip and equipment grant. Needs to be also applied here. Just because you want to serve somebody who maybe is served by the Agency for Persons with Disabilities, simply that the fact that they're determined eligible for med waiver services does not necessarily mean that they are considered transportation disadvantaged eligible. So that needs to be part of the equation for a project. The requirements of the project. Again, the project can support multiple goals, but it needs to have a singular purpose. So we use the example here. If you want to be able to support maybe veterans to access a VA hospital in a neighboring county, well, that could be considered 2 goals. You're increasing access to a specific group and you're providing cross-county trips, but it has a singular focus. As opposed to say, oh, we want to do services for veterans inside the county, and we want to do cross-county for general TD, and it's multiple different types of goals that kind of seem like they're cross-purpose. We really are trying to discourage that because when we're trying to review these proposals, we want to make sure it is very clearly understood what is the aim of the project. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. But as far as the other requirements go, there is a cap of $750,000 for a single service area project and a cap for a regional multi-service area project of 1.5 million. Again, something to be very mindful of, even though those are the caps, and it looks like that will be probably the caps provided in the legislative budget side. That does not mean that you're going to get up to that maximum amount, especially if there's only 3 million. That is going to be really challenging for us to be able to award what your requested amount is. So just because that is the cap does not obligate the commission to award that amount. And that is something to be very mindful of, especially this year, because we expect it to be tighter. Also in our restrictions, the CTD can only award one grant per service area. So if you want to say apply for present 2 proposals for your service area, you are welcome to provide multiple proposals, but you will only be the commission will only be able to grant one, and that's not a guarantee that you would get that one, but that is what we are limited to in terms of our authority to award. All projects must have a 10% local match, just like the trip and equipment grant. And the funds are only allowed to be used to reimburse for trips. This is not for capital equipment, technology purchases, or any other kinds of expenditures. This year, the deadline to submit proposals is April 30th. So, and as always, as we always like to say, is that everything is contingent upon what is in the legislative appropriation, as well as what the governor approves. So even if we get down to beginning of June and the commission has approved awards for the next fiscal year, until the governor signs the budget is not official. So services, as far as that, we're looking at a fiscal year beginning July 1 of 2024 through June 30th of 2025. So services can begin from July 1 onward. They cannot begin beforehand. Grantees must submit invoices to us on a monthly basis to be reimbursed under the grant. And there will be an expectation that if you do receive an award, this is really for the newbies. If you do receive an award, you will have to provide a presentation to the commission sometime during the next fiscal year. I will talk about that a little bit as far as the current projects go, when that will be set. Can't emphasize this enough. This year, the funding is going to be tight, and it's going to be very much a much more competitive process. We are going to give first consideration to the current projects that are reapplying. And I'll explain that a little bit, why that's important for us in terms of the testing. But we're certainly going to be open to looking at other new projects if we can. But when we're limited to a very small amount of money, it is going to be harder for us to be able to consider awarding for new projects, let alone even the existing ones that are reapplying. Which also means for those projects, when you're requesting funding, be prepared to expect that there is a strong chance that that funding may be, if the subcommittee recommends the project to be approved, it might be recommending a different amount. So, again, like let's say we have 2 projects that are regional and they are requesting the max amount. If the commission were to approve those on the max amount, well, that wouldn't leave any funding left for the other projects. So that is a issue that we have to be mindful of when we get into the review process. The other aspect of this is to be considering how much, for those current projects especially, how much are you drawing down or being reimbursed under the current year or the previous years? Because that will also weigh in the determination. If a project is spending their dollars consistently month to month, that's going to have a stronger chance than a project that may not be. Now, we understand there may be circumstances outside of the control of some of the CTCs on that regard, especially if it's a newer project, but it is something that is going to weigh into the decision making especially when there are less dollars to be able to award out. Time limits. Now, this is a new aspect of this grant. In December, the commission made a decision to limit the number of years a project could be considered eligible. Now, that's not guaranteeing that a project would be funded for 4 years, but that would be the absolute limit of when a project could be considered. The reason why we did this is because these are projects that are meant to be testing. Something that's innovative means it is implying it's something new. And after a certain period of time, even if the project is doing very well and there's demonstrated a need, then it comes down to, at some point, it has to be a sustainability aspect to it. This grant is not intended to be indefinite. And the commission was given an option of how many years to consider at the December commission meeting. Commission went with 4 years. And part of that reason was because we understood that the first year especially is challenging for a lot of these projects to get services off the ground. And so we wanted to see a little bit of a leniency on the first year. I mean, we still have expectations of there has to be some progress made, but that there would be some understanding that it might take some time to get it off the ground, and then have the next 3 years being really something that we could have more consistent trends of seeing where these services are going. So that was the reason. And then, of course, it was applied retroactively to the projects based on how many years they were funded on the for the last few years, not including the year we had the repeal of MCORs, because there was no funding available. So that was included in the commission meeting packet on December 11th. So going forward, what this means is that if a project, we understand from year to year that a project may want to adjust for the next year, maybe by changing up a little bit of how they operate, or they want to expand it. We see this very often where a service might want to, say, expand other types of days of the week, or they want to expand other individuals within the TD population to be served by this specific project. We will consider those as part of the review for the upcoming fiscal year, but that does not mean that it will change the timeline for a project to be funded. So that is in essence what is to be planned going forward. Is if you're planning a project and you're doing a new project, and then maybe a year later you're saying, well, we want to expand that to do X, Y, and Z, that may be acceptable, but it's not going to change the whole timeline. It's not going to start all over again. Some additional pieces of this. This is not really new information. We are operating on a cone of silence, so meaning that we will only be answering and providing feedback to grant applicants based on the training opportunities that we're presenting here. So today is the first one. This webinar is a chance for applicants to be able to ask questions. If you have a specific question throughout the season, you can email it to this account, FLCTD grant apps at dot.state.fl.us. And we will post answers to that on the website so that everybody is able to see the information at the same time and not just being tailored to one applicant. We'll also have another training webinar in April where we'll provide more specific guidance. And most importantly, this is something that we strongly encourage that you take advantage of the early bird opportunity to submit your proposals early and get feedback on the content from the staff. So that will be March 29th this year. So please take advantage of that, because that not only is helpful to the applicants, it's also helpful to us to seeing if there are common challenges that can go into informing our other technical assistance and guidance to the rest of the field. Some important dates coming up. March 8th is the end of the legislative session, which will have then the budget determined by then. It'll still have to go, of course, through the governor to sign, but at least we would have a pretty certain planning going into the rest of the season as to how much money will be looking to be appropriated. Then again, I mentioned the early bird deadline is March 29th. And when we receive those, our deadline internally for CTD staff is to get feedback no later than April 12th to those applicants. And then we will have a second training webinar on April 18th to basically both share what we've learned from the early birds as far as general additional support that you guys need to designing your applications and some other additional guidance if we need to. And then we will have presentations scheduled for April 23rd and 24th for the current projects that this is again going back to that new requirement that we started last year and we're doing again this year. That is for the projects to basically share a progress report to the full commission or subcommittee members as well on what they've learned with the current year that they're doing their services. Now, I understand Sherry is working with each of you individually for those of you who are current projects to schedule that. So she is still in the process of doing that. She asked me to make sure to mention that here. So if you haven't heard from her yet, she is working on it. We're just trying to get everyone's schedules together on that. April 30th is the deadline for this year. And then remember, if you can't get it in by April 30th, it won't be accepted. Just because that's the deadline, doesn't mean wait till the last day to write your proposal. Strongly encourage you guys to look at, plan ahead, try to get your proposals done sooner so that if you have to go through and clean it up, you have that window of opportunity still. The subcommittee will be meeting on May 16th and 17th to determine which projects to recommend. And then the commission will make its final decision on them on June 5th. That commission meeting is scheduled to be in Tampa for that day. Okay, some questions to consider going into designing your proposals. Going back to the original intent is to think about the added value from the customer perspective. So what are some barriers that you might see inhibiting certain individuals from getting served with the Transportation Disadvantage Program that you might want to test? Excuse me. Where does the local TD program fall short in meeting these needs? And so how do you see the ISD grant being maybe somewhere that you could try to test meeting a new segment of the population that you couldn't meet under the current trip and equipment grant? What evidence can you be able to present to showing how you're meeting these needs? So it's not enough to say, well, we want to be able to serve individuals who are trying to go to work. We don't have the ability to serve people who are going to work right now. We want to support that, or we're limited in that. What evidence do you have to be able to present that supports it? Do you have population statistics? Do you have data in your existing grant or your AOR that can be able to demonstrate that? I believe somebody has got some sound in the background. If we could mute that. Okay. And then how would the customer perceive the value? Again, are you adding, are you increasing their ability to get services? Are you getting them to access activities that they would not otherwise be able to meet under the trip and equipment grant? These are some things to consider as far as from the customer perspective. Some additional questions to consider is bringing in partners, how they play a role in this. By the way, it's very important when you put in a proposal about that you're going to name a partner, please be specific in how that partner is going to support the project. Simply having a letter of support from another business or college or some other group is not considered a partnership. That's merely just a letter of support. We want to see how these partners are going to help assist in whether it's referring clients to the project, getting information out to these eligible riders, etc. Thinking about where those partners play a role.
Hey, David,
Yes.
this is Sherry. I want to interrupt real quick because I want to avoid some confusion. So it's not a bad thing to have letters of support to include with the application from a business or a college or whatever. But if you're trying to claim that as a partnership, because I think there's some bonus points at when we evaluate to have partners, they really have to provide some contribution to the project. It can't just be that they support. And that's the difference. We welcome letters of support, but if you're trying to get the extra points for having a partnership, that just wouldn't count as a partnership alone. And that's what we're trying to clarify.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for adding that. Also giving me a second to get some water here. I think the other questions to consider is what is the implications of this project to the broader TD program? So, for example, you may have a population that has been underserved, and when you start serving them with a project like an ISD grant, some implications could be, well, this population has, say, a higher severe need of more frequent trips, or there is some additional type of advocacy that needs to be, information needs to be shared with this group about the TD program that they may not have known about the TD program beforehand. So I'm just thinking of an example where you have a sort of a broader implication than just simply we provided trips and this is what ended up being the result of the project itself. So thinking of the implications to the broader TD program. The other thing to think about is we also say like this is helpful to other systems. You know, when a project is presenting information like what we're going to have in April when we have the presentations, another service area may look at that and go, I want to explore doing something like that in my district or my community. Then you have this information to kind of be helpful to the broader state, not just to the local service area itself. Develop the lab mentality. This is something we've been emphasizing for a long time now, is that this is meant to test something new. We understand that you're not going to have necessarily the results, you know, day one of a project. And even if you're starting to serve people pretty much at the beginning, there may be some adjustments that need to be made as the time goes on. So with that in mind, to be considering, that's one of the reasons why it's important that we give first consideration to the existing projects, because we want to be able to give them some time. That doesn't guarantee that a project's going to get funded for 4 years straight, but it is going to give them a little bit of an edge in the competitiveness of it, because there is some expectation that we're going to have to see over time what these results will be. Now, once the project is starting to get off the ground and we're starting to see results, and assuming those results are in going in the positive direction, the next phase is then to think about what it is, how is it going to be sustainable? This has been a challenge for our system. And I honestly think this is a challenge probably nationally too, is that, you know, this specific funding especially is not intended to be indefinite. And some of these projects might be serving a really great need, but at some point there has to be some way of sustaining it if it wants to be continued beyond this funding. So this year we did include some additional expectation within the grant, within the manual, to describe the sustainability. What are your planning efforts going into beyond this, whether it's not funded after this year or into the future? How would you expect to sustain it? Remember that the goal here is evaluating, as we're evaluating the outcomes, whether it can be sustained. This is a testing ground, so not necessarily that you're continuing the project as it's proposed. So for example, what that means is like, okay, you saw that you wanted to be able to do on-demand services, but you're not going to be able to do the amount of trips that you projected under the project indefinitely. So you may have to say there has to be a kind of a tailored approach or tapering of it to be able to make it work sustainably. The goal here again is to, as we're testing it, is looking at what are the implications if you want to expand that beyond what is under this funding. Sherry, was there anything else to add on this? I know this is a big component, especially this year as we're looking at now time limits to these projects. Is there more to add to this?
I don't have anything else to add. I think you hit it. We've struggled with this through the years of having it in or having it. It's difficult to sustain or explain how you're going to sustain it, but we need to see some planning efforts on that, at least on the projects with maybe not the very first year, because it's hard to even determine whether you want to be able to sustain it. It may not be the need that you thought it was originally when you submitted the proposal. So, and I think you covered that.
Okay. All right. Well, we're now going to go into the application and the manual, as well as our review process. I might need, Sherry, I might need you to help me in some of these because I'm going to go through them kind of a high level, and let me know if I missed anything. Again, it's very important to carefully review everything in the grant manual. We will not accept any incomplete applications. Please identify the key service areas, the staff, the project start time, and the funding request. Please include the local match as well. Include a detailed description of the project scope. And I would say if there was an area that is the most, I mean, look at again, all of it is important, but especially the project scope, because if this is a common thing, I feel like I have to repeat every year. If we're reading through it and we're getting into about 6 pages, 7 pages, and we can't understand what the project's doing, that's not a good sign. So, when you're putting in these proposals, think about your audience is not going to, try to read through the lines. They're going to need to know pretty upfront, what is the project trying to accomplish? And remember, it's also being succinct and keeping it within 15 pages. We will not accept the proposals if they are going way above that. And that's, by the way, including the attaching supporting documents.
Yes, I want to stop you right there though, because I do want to, I had this question last year. Letters of support are outside of the 15 pages, but any type of plan that you're referring to or pages of the plan that you're including as part of your evidence of need, that would contribute to part of the 15 pages. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page there.
Good. Yeah, don't attach your whole TDSP 50-page document as part of the, if you're going to cite the TDSP, try to use the, cite the specific quote in the proposal. Enlisting help. Describe how the CTCs may coordinate services within the region. So what that means is if you're going to be partnering on a regional project, you might have a lead CTC that's identified, but you also need to consider eligibility. We know that eligibility may have differing components for each service area. How will you coordinate that, the billing and all the other aspects of the project? If the project's including partnerships, again, describe the roles, the contributions, not just the letter of support being attached, but also thinking about how they're going to be integral to the project itself. Also, how is a TNC going to be a part, or any non-traditional provider, to enhance the service quality? And if there's an expected delay, Please explain why. We know that things can happen that you may not necessarily be able to predict, or delays that were unexpected after the project starts. But try your best to build as much as you can in your proposal. That's going to be really critical. And here's the thing. Uh, I I think it's important to remind folks is that if you get an award and you're getting delayed, another project could have gotten rejected that had claimed that it was going to get a service started up much sooner than that. So that might not be, again, it might not be a CTC's fault entirely that there is a extended delay, but not having it in the proposal gets very frustrating when there are other projects that are getting rejected on the, for whatever other reason. And that project could have potentially been able to do services but was not getting that same award. So that's important, especially again, that we have less funding this year. That's going to be a very big aspect to thinking about these projects as they're being weighted, in a competitive sense. Okay, other instructions. Provide a detailed budget. This has been some years we've had some trouble with this. Be sure that you have an explanation as to how you arrived at that budget, the rates and the methodology that's used, so using your rate model. Again, I think a lot of this is pretty clear. The service area, if you're a multi-county service area, say like if Orlando links, not to pick on y'all, I just using this as a tangible example. If y'all want to do a proposal that is just within the 3-county service area, you'd still be having to keep it within the cap of 750,000, unless you wanted to expand to include counties outside, say Lake County. Then in that case, it would be considered a regional project. So that is how we have applied that rule on a single service area gets considered to be 750,000 as the cap. So that's just something to consider as part of the instructions of the guide. This is a sample budget that is included in the, I believe that's included in the packet. Sherry, was there anything else to add about the budget? What information is critical to include there?
I would like to add that if we have had in the past where a project is proposed and the entire budgeted amount is listed under purchase transportation because they're contracting the actual service out. I'm not going to say that that's not allowed, but if you're absorbing all the other project costs in-house, it needs to be explained. It isn't received very well to just have this whole budget page and then only a line item for services without some kind of explanation as to how the other cost of that project are going to be absorbed. So just make sure that that's addressed in the proposal.
Thank you. Okay. Got one more. I need to mute.
Got background noise again.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting closer to the end here. So just wanted to cover some of the common pitfalls and some strategies to think about as you go through and develop these proposals. It's very important. I never can say this enough, that when you're writing these proposals, think of the audience, that you're reaching a group of people. Most of these members of the subcommittee, they do not do your business day to day. They do not understand all the technicalities that are involved. Now, I understand acronyms are part of our daily language and we want to be succinct, and so that's fine to use acronyms, but make sure that it is explained so when somebody's reading through it, that they can follow along with your logic and what you're trying to accomplish. So just, when we're putting the proposals together, or sorry, when we're reviewing these proposals, we want to be able, as the staff, to be able to explain it to the subcommittee members, and the subcommittee members to read it even on face value and to understand what the project is trying to accomplish. Oftentimes also we've seen in the past, there's been challenges with applications not following the format. We've had proposals in the past that would say they wouldn't even answer they wouldn't go by the questions in the manual. They would just submit an entirely different document. So it needs to follow the instructions and the format that we've given. We will be looking at invoice data, both on the trip and equipment and in the ISD grant. So if a proposal is saying we don't have the ability to serve or take people to this location, and the invoice data shows that there are trips going there, it's not explained in the proposal, then it's going to have certainly a harder time to be considered eligible or considered for funding. So be very careful that the data that you have supports the claims in your proposal. Calculations need to be double checked to be sure that because oftentimes we'll see is incorrect or inconsistent calculations in the rate setting or the budget setting. And then again, eligibility determination, simply saying that we want to serve a certain group of people and just identifying them as such, say veterans, and without actually going through the process that they were determined transportation disadvantaged eligible. That is a concern. So make sure in the proposal that you have how you're going to determine them eligible for the project through the TD application process. And I kind of already emphasized some of this stuff. Let's be specific and to the point. Try to understand that your audience, that they are needing to be able to understand it pretty quickly when they're reading it, not way down into page 14. Allowing time for yourselves when you're putting these proposals together. Ask. This is something I think that we all could benefit from is when you're putting a report together, ask another person to look at it. Maybe somebody who is outside of who's doing this on a day-to-day basis, so that you can be able to get that perspective before it comes time for deadline. Again, a lot of this stuff is kind of the same what we've been saying. Identifying the local match, that's sometimes forgotten in the proposals. In the past, we've seen that, and also identifying how you're going to participate, serve a specific project, a specific population in determining your eligibility. So I feel like we kind of covered all that already. We will be, as far as the evaluation, we will be using the scoring rubric for the subcommittee when they come time to review them. That scoring rubric is included in the application packet. We will be looking at the invoice data again, both the trip and equipment and the ISD grant. And then the recommendations that the subcommittee will make, they will be included in the commission meeting packet leading up to the June 5th meeting. So at the latest, that should be available by May 29th. Anything else, Sherry, before I go into the last part of this presentation?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So just a few examples we wanted to give to kind of illustrate some, when we're looking at proposals, they might have different goals, but they are competing for the same pot of money. And so when it comes to decision time, they're going to be weighted in essence as which one's the strongest to which one's the weakest, and determining how they are getting, which one's getting recommended for award and not, or a different amount. So this first proposal is a scenario of a project that wants to serve veterans to get them to a VA hospital. The proposal has identified, based on the TDSP Transportation Disadvantage Service Plan, that there's about 200 vets that are living inside the county, which is 20% of those are considered potentially transportation disadvantaged. It identifies that there are only a limited amount of days that they can be able to support those trips for Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that the ISD grant would increase those trips to 5 days a week and an estimated goal of 20 new TD riders. I would say that this is an example of on a simple illustration of a strong proposal. It shows there's 2 ISD goals, meaning increased access to TD veterans, as well as a cross-county component. It cites the county stats to support the arguments that are being made in the proposal. The invoice data that we look at in this is reinforcing, validating what the claims in the proposal by showing that their trips are only going Tuesdays and Thursdays. The proposal outlines goals and new funding, and then it also demonstrates that this was not funded. This would be considered a new project. So this was not an example of a proposal that has already been existing in the area. And then they also included detailed budget and rates. So this is an example, again, of a strong proposal. Now, weighing that against the other two, this is another project that's focusing on rural TD trips. This one, in this case, is saying that they want to support new TD trips in a rural area of the county that they're struggling to be able to support. Their case that this proposal is making is because the demands in the urban area of the county is outweighing or is causing them to where they cannot serve as many people in the rural sections of the county. The project would also support a connector to a fixed route within the urban area. And the goal is to provide 500 trips to rural TD residents. So this one is considered a weaker proposal because it does say that they're going to support 2 ISD grant goals. In this case, it was increased access and improving access to a fixed route system, but it's not quite clear in the proposal how those two connect, how they're supporting each other. For example, if I were to say that one feedback in an early bird proposal would be, so are you connecting the rural area residents to the fixed route system in the urban area so that they can be able to access activities there through the fixed route? That would be an example where you can maybe make it closer connected. It does not include evidence as to supporting the need. We found in the invoice data that there were also 500 trips that occurred in that rural area. So it's kind of, again, conflicting with what their claim in the proposal when they're saying that they're not being able to serve somebody, but their data is showing that they are providing some service, some level of service there. And it is unclear how they arrived at the estimated 500 trips in the proposal, and there was no budget included. So these are some examples, again, where a proposal that has missing information or is unclear goes into making it harder for the subcommittee to recommend it for funding. Proposal C, I would call this kind of like the more in between proposal A and B. It's maybe not as strong as A, but not as weak as B. This one's saying it is an example of a project that is reapplying again to provide job training and employment trips. But this year they want to add a new component, using a TNC to improve their on-time performance in the claim of it being 5% of an on-time performance. They want to also expand the services to include students of the local college, and they have a survey that the college did that identified 50 students that would benefit from this service. And the goal is to provide about 20,750 trips for employment activities next year. So some of the key findings, evaluation here in this particular proposal was, well, it is supporting the same goal as it was the current fiscal year, but they want to expand it to add students to the list. They also want to include TNC to support it, but they don't explain they don't have anything in their on-time performance currently to help us to determine how how this would be exactly increasing on-time performance by 5%. 5% of what? So that's an example where there's some missing or some additional information needed. We look at the ISD data, that is the current fiscal year. This is something important. Invoice data, sometimes we don't get, we get a lag time. So when we're getting into May, we better have some invoice data to be able to determine where the project seems to be going into the current fiscal year. And so in this particular scenario, we got about 6 months of invoice data that indicate that it is spending 49% of its funds so far in the current fiscal year. That gives us an indication that it is on track to spending its funding or most of its funding by the end of the fiscal year. So these are some examples that can help illustrate our process that we use when we're evaluating proposals, not just on face value, what it's saying, but how it compares to the other proposals that we're getting. So I think that covers. Anything else, Sherry, that I missed on the process before we open it up for questions?
There's a couple of things that I wanted to, I guess, review one more time, and then we have a few questions in the chat box. So just to add to some of the things to pay attention to when you're proposing or saying that the project's going to provide X number of trips to X number of TD eligible individuals, we need to see or understand how those numbers were, how you came up with those numbers. So any kind of explanation, it just doesn't, you just don't want to kind of throw out the numbers and hope that they stick to the page. We want to see how you came up with those numbers. The other thing was on the budget side. I know a couple of times in the past, this has been something that was misunderstood. So it's an expense budget, and those line items are expenses that it's going to cost to do that project. We can only reimburse under this grant, as with our other trip and equipment grant, for trips and miles. We cannot reimburse a line item out of that expense budget. You can include it in your budget to then determine what rates you need to cover the expenses of the project. So I want to make sure that that's real clear. And then when you're looking at your or creating your rates, most of we have a rate model worksheet. You can use that and put only the expenses for this project in the rate model, and then the revenue that you're going to receive for it, or whatever the grant amount that you're asking for it in the local match, and project your trips and miles and see what rate it comes out with. That can be used. Or if that is not used, then you just need to explain the methodology used to come up with the rates that you're asking for. I think those were the main things. One other thing I want to say as far as the scope goes, when we are doing these projects, proposing these projects, and then they get approved and we're sitting here working on the scope, it gets very unclear exactly, even before we've had discussions, what is it that you're testing? So when you're developing your scope and your proposal, make it clear. Ask yourself, what am I putting on this piece of paper, and is it clear what we're trying to test? Because that's what's going to determine, it drives the whole engine. So that's a critical piece, because I can't tell you how many times there's so much information in there that we lose sight. Okay, what is it? What are we testing? So I think that's the three things I wanted to say. And if you're ready for questions, David, you tell me.
Just one more thing before we get into questions, I just want to say we're going to try our best to answer what we can. If we can't answer the question, like, putting us on the spot and asking a scenario that it'd be too complicated to answer on the spot. I think what we'll do, and Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, we can post an answer on the website that will have that information. So If we're not able to get to it today, we will try, if it's pertinent to the ISD grant, we'll try to post it on the website. All right. All right,
Okay.
we'll open it up.
The first question that I have in the chat box is what all kind of organizations are able to provide the local funds portion or the local match? And I think we've provided some examples in the program manual. We are not picky. It cannot be state funds and it cannot be federal funds, but it can be any kind of local generated funds. So if it's a donation, if it is local governments that are paying the match, or a municipality that would pay the match, or if you're doing employment trips, maybe working with Walmart or some of the places that you may take those riders to, are any of those on your part in your partnerships? They could provide the match to help their employees do those trips. I don't know if that is enough, David, if you have anything, or Karen, if you have anything else to add, jump on.
No, I'm good.
Okay. The next question I have is, when talking about the 4-year time limit, is that retroactive back to the mobility enhancement grants pre-2021, or does it simply refer to the ISD grants that got started in 22-23?
Good question. It is, yes, it goes back to the mobility enhancement grant. So it goes back actually before, well, what is it, 2016
16.
when that started.
Yes.
So yeah, so it would be applied to however long you received the funding from the commission to test this innovative project, not including the 1 year that was not funded because there was no funding to give.
Right. And I think that's really it. Felix, I'm not sure I'm following your question in here. So if you have additional specific project or application questions, if you want to email, again, anybody, if you think of questions after this session, email them to the FL-CTD grant apps at dot.state.fl.us. That address is in the application package, and we will be, accumulating and gathering those questions and continuing to post them, any updates to our website, so that everybody's able to see and hear the same answers.
I'm going to open up the. I didn't see the question. Felix on to elaborate what the question was.
I'm not sure how to open, unless they can unmute themselves.
They can
I don't.
unmute themselves, I
Okay.
think.
Okay. Felix, do you want to follow up with that question? I think he just wasn't sure if he was supposed to be asking these questions. So, and that was the gist of what he said.
Is there any other questions, members of the webinar?
Okay, I have another one in the chat. For a project that was awarded last year outside of having first consideration, to what degree is it expected that this new application will include modifications to the existing project model? Wow.
To what extent are, so in essence, what I'm hearing is, to what extent can you expand or modify your proposal? Did I understand that correctly?
To what degree is it expected that this new application will include modifications to the existing? So whether or not they have to modify the existing project when they apply for the next year.
I mean, from our from my point of view, I think that's up to the projects to seeing if that's something that's necessary for them. I mean, we try to we encourage you to keep it as consistent as you can with the goals you set. But if you're getting, we tried to use some examples in this presentation about you want to expand the times of day or a new area of coverage, or you want to add more writers to the program. Those are the kinds of things where you make a case for it. I mean, that would be part of the consideration. But if you're wanting to like completely change the project, and I mean, like we agreed to support on demand, and then you're saying, no, we want to actually do something entirely different. I can't think off the top of my head what that would be. Then that, with the same agreement that we approved the project on the basis of that goal, that's going to be harder for us to understand. Like, well, why are you changing it? There, do the best you can in your proposal. If you're going to adjust it, explain the reason. You want to test something further than what you did this year, show why that is. So the best way for us to make the decisions is based on how well you describe it in your proposal. I hope that helps give a little bit of guidance on that.
Right, and I know sometimes, just to help a little bit, some of the projects proposed in their original proposal may cover, I'm going to use one on-demand example. It covered one specific area within the county that they did that project in. And on the second or third year when they requested funding, they opened it up to the entire county instead of just that one smaller area. So it wasn't wrong that they did that, or it wasn't right that they did that. They just thought, they felt they were able to handle it within that smaller section, so they were ready to open it up to the entire county to benefit, if that helps you out, but it's not required. I have another question. We are looking into an on-demand type service for veteran population. The question which came up was, because this was a dedicated service, would it qualify, or would this come from general funds? And I'm not sure if general funds means the general trip and equipment funds, or is this something, Anita, you might have to expand on that a little, or open your mic. Local government. On-demand service for veteran. The question came up because this was a dedicated service. Would it qualify? So you're just trying to serve the veteran population that
I'm
are.
sorry, Sherry, I'm back. I was trying to plug in. Basically, currently, the situation we have right now is our commissioners, there's been a request for the veteran population. So currently, we have it to where for the door-to-door service, for the ones that are TD eligible, we do provide service to a dedicated location to one of our transfer stations. So from there, they go into Pinellas County to the VA hospital. So on the veteran stand down, there was a situation that came up where a veteran had stated that they're not receiving any service at all, the transportation service. So our commissioners looked into that, and they felt as if they wanted us to look at providing service to veterans, an on-demand type service. Just for veterans only. And they wanted 2 buses to just dedicate to that service. The general fund would actually come from our local government. But then, we'd explain to them that, for the 5310 and for that type of the grant, it's not a dedicated service. It's a service that kind of serves that eligible population. So that question had come up, earlier when David had mentioned that if you're looking at for a particular type of population to provide service to, that's something that could be considered. But because it's dedicated, that was our concern.
Well,
Yeah, Sherry, do you have an idea? I was I struggled a little bit. I'm following it all, but you have thoughts?
Yeah, I basically ran some numbers for them. I, to kind of explain that it's not just, the veterans that qualify for our eligibility process, they are utilizing the service, not just for the VA hospital. There's a small amount that are actually using it to go to the VA hospital. And because we do have a clinic here locally that they utilize, just to take, non-emergency type trips, but they're also doing other things like all of the other life essential trips that they're taking. So they actually saw those numbers, but they're still wanting something that's kind of dedicated to veterans. They actually want they're looking at wrapping a bus and, making it more visible to the veterans so they know that we do have a type of service that we can provide for them. So we're looking at more of an outreach type thing, something to kind of, bring them more into our system. So right now, I guess we're working with Cutter to see if there's some type of program that we can come up with. And the one thing that came up was the on-demand type service.
so I think you have a lot going on right
Yes.
there. So, and I don't think that this would be a good place to hash out all the potential different projects, but I will say that if you are looking, regardless of what the population is, whether it's veterans or individuals with developmental disabilities, or if it's a specific population, you just would need to propose your project as an whether the on-demand piece and but the biggest piece is going to be, regardless of what population it is, they have to be eligible for TDTF through that whole
Correct.
eligibility process. So you would have to demonstrate that you do have this service available, but it's not the be all end all, and you want maybe to test an on-demand component for this population who are TD eligible. And you're having to go to whatever, if there's a specific location or whatever. So I wouldn't say automatically, no, it's not eligible, but there's a lot going on that you would have to make it very clear that it's not duplicating.
Correct. And that's what I'm trying to explain. So it's a little bit difficult trying to explain all the different components involved in it.
Right, right.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and start wrapping up here. We do appreciate everybody's time. We have this recorded. We're gonna post it on the website. We got now a little over a month I guess it's about a month for the folks who are interested in participating in the early bird. So we look forward to seeing proposals there. Anything else, Sherry, that's important to coming up for March? We got the commission meeting on March 20th, which isn't related, but for those who are interested in participating in that. We'll have more information on that shortly.
No
think I've-
additional, just remember, March 29th, early bird deadline to submit project applications no later than, it can be before then, no later than March 29th, and you will receive feedback no later than April 12th on your proposals. So take advantage of that opportunity.
Well, with that, again, thanks everybody for your time. We look forward to seeing proposals in the next month. And for those of you who are going to be able to make the commission meeting, it will be in Auburndale in Polk County. So we're looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks there. All right, I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you.
Thank you.